Hello, welcome back to OConnor Racing. What this series of videos is going to be about is this is a 2006 Yamaha YZ250. We're going to show you what we do on the factory builds. This is great for GNCC racing, hare scrambles, or fairly short motocross tracks. This setup works great. We're going to do the crankshaft, match cases, port the cylinder, trim the base of the cylinder, believe it or not, and what that's going to do is that's going to move the port timing. Basically the only porting we're really going to do is just clean the cylinder up. Most of the porting is going to be, the port differences are going to be generated off of dropping the cylinder. We're going to do a head modification and we're going to do a stinger mod. This thing, by the time it's done, do not be afraid to put this on a motocross track against the 4-stroke 250s. You will whole shot that whole pack and this thing barks. They're going to say, what the hell's this guy got? We've had some really good luck with this build, and we're going to share a couple secrets with it. First thing we're going to do is rebuild this crankshaft. First thing we're going to do, and again, I say this in a lot of videos because I do a lot of different bikes, and but I'm not going to assume that you watch all of them. You're going to watch what pertains to you. I mean, if you got a YZ250, you could care less about a Blaster or a Banshee or anything else. So we're going to dispel a myth. These blue spots on the crank, that's totally normal. That's done at the factory. That is not from being overheated. This rod is definitely shot. The blue on the rod, that's a concern. So we're going to go ahead and swap this rod out. But this stuff, don't worry about it. That's fine. It's normal. But here's the first thing we do. We got a crankshaft apart, and this is what I want you to look at right here. That's part of the stuffer. And keep in mind, this motorcycle's almost 7 years old. It's not a bad design on Yamaha's part, but these stuffers, once that crank gets hot and everything in there starts, getting generated to high temperatures, those stuffers have a tendency to melt. So what we do on all of these, even if they're not melted, I'm going to come in here with a die grinder, and I'm going to put a radius in here. And what that radius is going to do is that's going to be a spot to hold oil. So even if this does, future years, whatever, start to move out, and any of these guys racing, we're all over these things anyway, but in future years, if this starts to move out, we're going to be creating additional clearance, but we're going to make a spot here for oil to hang out. And what we found is it just preserves the life of the crankshaft quite a bit. So that's the next step. We're going to get those stuffers straightened out. Alright, here's that web with the radius in it. We went ahead and did the same thing to the other side. Next thing to do is put the crankshaft together. Well, we got our crankshaft done, and we were able to hold 5/10,000ths of 1 inch on either side. We're just not going to get it any closer than that. If you're going to be doing anything, I mean, try to get it as close as you can possibly get it. That's well within factory specs. And you know what? Why should you believe me? I'll show you. Here it is in the bench centers. Those needles are barely moving. It's about 1/2 thousandths, well within spec. Alright, so we got a nice crankshaft. I'm going to package this up, ship it to my customer, and just keep one thing in mind. It doesn't matter how close we get these things in here if you guys don't do a proper assembly. So we're actually not putting this engine together. We're doing all the machine work. I'm sending it off to my customer. I think he's in Pennsylvania. And he's going to do the assembly, so it's only as good as the assembly you guys do. So from here, I think we're going to go on to the cylinder. We got a cylinder out of the box, came back just from plating. It's been ported, and the base, we actually turned the base down on this 30 thousandths. It's a pretty generic number. The Yamaha's a pretty good company. I mean, most of their stuff is going to be pretty repetitive, but we just start with that. Started with 30 thousandths at the base of the cylinder here. Turned that down, did the cylinder porting, sent it out to Power Seal USA. They're in Pennsylvania. I think it's Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, but sent it out to them with the piston. They did a nice job. We always check everything that comes back here, and Power Seal I've never had a problem with. Power Seal is a good company. If you need plating, you don't want to send it to me, send it off to them. They're a great company. We've never had a problem with them. Now, the other thing they do for us is they send us t-shirts now and again, and we appreciate that, but surprised to get this with it today, Monkey Madness, and they sent me a calendar with all kinds of pictures of monkeys on it, and I'm a pretty foolish boy myself, but I tell you what, I only like one thing better than building engines, and that's looking at monkeys doing stupid things. So look at this guy flying a kite. You imagine that? Can you imagine waking up, looking out your screen porch door and seeing a monkey flying a kite? Look at them, they're just so stupid, I love it. But thanks to Power Seal, and thanks for the calendar, guys. Next step is we're going to assemble power valves. Alright, boys and girls, change of plans because my man Tarmo forgot to put the power valve components in the solution, so I just did that, and we're going to go to the next step. Tarmo's waving at me with his middle finger again, but we're going to take the silencer here, and effectively, I mean, to take all the bullshit out of this, excuse my French, we're just going to take 3 inches off the back of this. This is a Pro Circuit silencer, so you're gonna lose this mount. It's not going to be a problem. It's not going to go anywhere, but we're going to make a shorty silencer out of this Pro Circuit silencer, and I will show you how we're going to do that. First thing you got to do is disassemble it. Alright, I got this silencer blown apart, and wow. This is bad news right here. This is a lot of horsepower getting sucked up. This packing is probably original, I'm guessing. Not good stuff. You lose a lot of power right there, so nothing else being said, I'm glad we're in here. What we're going to do next is we're going to address the perforated tube on the inside. It's really important that all these holes are opened up and nice and clean. So I'm just going to take this thing and throw it right in a sandblaster and just open all of these holes right back up. They're all full of carbon, and we'll show you what to do after that. That's what it's supposed to look like. All these holes opened up. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to start chopping this thing up. Alright, we're just going to go ahead and cut 3 inches. I've got it marked, I don't know if you can see it, but we're going to cut 3 inches off the back side of the Pro Circuit silencer. If you get a bandsaw, if you don't have a bandsaw, I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can do something like this, but obviously we got the equipment, we're going to use it, so we're just going to cut 3 inches again off the back side of this tube. Next step is to go ahead and take 3 inches off the perforated tube. So that's what it looks like, all dry assembled. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to clean out the end and the tube. Got all my components clean, and the next thing we're going to do, obviously you got to line the pipe up in the front with where it came off originally, and then I'm going to line the end piece of this silencer up to where I want it, and I'm going to transfer these holes through here so I can get some rivets in it. Got the holes in for the rivets. Waiting. I don't have silencer pack in here, but we'll definitely show you how to do that. So we're going to put this aside and go to the match boarding of the cases next. The next thing we're going to do is try to create a little bit better flow out of the cases to the cylinder, and you're kind of limited between the two of them, but all you need for this is some Dykem Blue. You can use a black magic marker, scriber, and a factory gasket. Alright, here's a shot of the absolute gross mismatch between the gasket and the cases, so we're going to go ahead and remove that. Well, here's a shot after the case boarding, match boarding the gasket, and as you can see, it's quite a bit closer. That's going to help with some airflow. Okay, got kind of late last night. New day in paradise. Next thing I'm going to do, I had this delivered to me last night, this packing. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to get the silencer all packed up. And I just want to point something out. This is Moose Racing 2-stroke silencer packing. This stuff costs $7.95. Really easy to work with, great product. We've been using it for a long time. Make sure you use silencer packing in here. Don't use insulation. It's not the right stuff. And definitely don't use steel wool. I've heard of people doing it, and it baffles me. I don't know why anybody. It's probably more expensive to pack it with steel wool than it is just with a piece of this. So if you don't have a motorcycle shop near you, give me a call. I'll get it to you and get it shipped out. But Moose Racing silencer packing. Let's get this thing filled up. Okay, here's a shot. We got our packing cut up. We just sliced it off to the width of the inside of the perforated tube. Some guys use tape in here. I don't see any reason for doing that. This is just safety wire. Wrap 2 pieces around. Just put it in an X. It's going to hold everything together. And next thing we're going to do is slide it into the tube. It's pretty easy if you know, I've got everything. Like again, don't use insulation for this. It's going to be more trouble than it's worth. It's probably not going to work anyway. So we got the perforated pipe in the tube. Got my end cap on. Drilled my holes. Everything looks like it's going to go together good. I'm going to put my screws back in here. A little bit of blue Loctite on them, and then I'm going to use pop rivets in here. 1/4-inch pop rivets. Okay, that's what we got when it's done. Got some rivets in the back, the screws in the front, everything nice and tight. And that's our 3-inch shorter silencer, and that's going to help to accent the new power band. And again, we're looking for a lot of low and a lot of mid in this thing. And you can do one final test on this. That's what I like to do. Sounds pretty good. We're going to run it. We got a power valve. We're going to start doing the assembly on the cylinder. Now, one thing I want to point out to you, this slider, it's got a little mark right here. That goes up into the cylinder this way. So just go ahead and slide that piece right in there. Alright, once you got the slider in, the next part is to put in the plugs, we'll call them for lack of a better word, the plugs for the sub-exhaust ports. And when you put this in, this goes towards the outside of the cylinder. It's the same on both sides. And just leave this little notch with that pin so you can see it in this hole right here. And these I just oiled them a little bit and just slide that right in there. Do the same thing on the other side. Alright, the next step is to put these actuating forks in. These go in with the little pins down, and this fork has to engage each pin in the block-offs for the sub-exhaust. The pins that we looked at, that fork has to be on that pin. So just go ahead and slide that in, get everything all nice and lined up. Alright, once you have that positioned in there, just move this actuating rod and just check your valves that block off the sub-exhaust, and make sure that when you move this, that valve is moving freely back and forth. Do that on both sides. Let's get everything laid in. You get the second plate on. The Phillips head screws with the washers go in the top, and then you've got the Allen, the cap screws. They're the only two in the whole cylinder. They're cap screws. Those go and lock that one in. I use blue Loctite on those as well. This next assembly is the rod that gets actuated off the governor, and that's what's going to control the plugs for the sub-exhaust and the slider for the top of the cylinder. First thing we're going to do is put the shaft in, and just because you're going to be putting some bolts in, just pay attention to this indicator right here, and you want this kind of facing you when you start to put this shaft in, and then you just kind of build up all these parts after it. I'll show you what the finished assembly looks like. Alright, once you get this put together, it should look like this, and I'll just go over the order really quick. Again, very important, that shaft, that little half moon that's cut out of it is facing up in this direction. And that's going to make the alignment of all these other parts with their screws. That's the way you have to do it. So as we slide the rod in, I build this up. I put one part in at a time. The first piece is the actuator for the sub-exhaust port block-off. And these are different parts. You can't mix these up, and you can tell the one on my left, looking at it, this is closer to the left side. That's where you want to put that. Then you put the spring in, you put a washer in, you put your center actuating piece in. This is all, we use this all as one piece. Next you put another washer, another spring, the other actuator for the other sub-exhaust port block off. And at this point we'll go ahead and put some blue Loctite on our bolts, put this one in, this one, and then we can check the valve and make sure everything's working correctly. Alright, here's where we're at. I put my retaining plate on the side over here and just kind of move this rod. I really like these power valves, the way that they work. The top slider opens before the valves for the sub-exhaust ports. So it's going to be a little bit harder to pull it back at this point, because now you have to actuate the spring, and that's what's going to start to open up the plugs for the sub-exhaust port. But it's a really good design on this valve, but just make sure everything's working. And at this point, like I say, you're going to have to put a little bit of juice to it to get those to move, but that's how it works. Next thing I'm going to do is his cylinder head. Alright, well, there's a shot of the cylinder head that we just finished up, and again, we took 30 thousandths off the base here. We just clipped right in 30,000, so I got to put this thing together to mock it up and check squish, but we'll adjust that for sure. These things come right around 70 on squish, you know, for fuel, and it'll keep you off of race gas. I prefer to run these things at least half and half. I might get it a little closer than 70, you know, probably 60. I wouldn't really push it any closer than that. But just to recap what we did here, this is a 2006 YZ250, and we changed our power band. These have traditionally they have a good mid hit, really explosive, and some guys will tell you they sign off on the top. Realistically, and think about this next time you're riding on your bike, and be truthful with yourself. You're not using any more than 25% of your full throttle opening anyway, most of the time. So what we're doing is we're giving you a lot of usable power down low, where you're going to be on the gas, you know, coming out of corners, and these things bone stock, probably, you know, put it on a road, it's probably going to go 70, 75, 80 miles an hour. I don't know anybody that goes 80 miles an hour on a motocross track. So with that, all that in mind, what we did here is we just moved all the power in a place where you're going to use it. And again, 30 thousandths off the base of the cylinder. We cut in 30 thousandths into the head, rechambered it, did some cylinder porting, did the shorty pipe, and matched the cases and the cylinder to the gasket. This is not something that we're doing on a whim. We've done many of these things, and these work phenomenal. And like I said at the beginning of the video, you can line up with the 250Fs, the 4-strokes. You will hole shot them if you can ride. I mean, this thing's going to create a lot of torque. This is a good build for a GNCC, for woods riders. If I was riding this in the woods, I'd throw a flywheel weight on it. Other than that, it's perfect for the woods, and it's also good for the shorter motocross tracks. So hope you enjoyed it. I'm sure there's a lot of guys out there that are going to disagree with this stuff, but build one, put it on, and all arguments stop there. Thanks for watching. OConnorRacing.com.